You know what you do when you have a beloved version of a character that's been loved for years? You bring in a new crew of people that have never worked with this character before, kill him and all his friends off in really distasteful, shitty ways, and pretty much spit on the legacy of the previous games because you don't give a shit. I am, of course, talking about Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, the new DC game, and I kind of want to take this time to talk about how I'm kind of feeling as a DC fan. I know I've been pretty negative with most things that I've been talking about with DC lately, but it's kind of hard when it feels like the studio that's in control of them, they don't give a shit about the IP, feels like they don't give a shit about the fans, and seemingly more and more they're bringing in people who actually actively hate these characters. You know, more specifically honing in on what happened with Batman. And what was pretty frustrating about that whole situation was it feels like a lot of criticism was kind of dismissed as people being a baby. You got idiots on Twitter like Moonlight Warrior kind of going on about how great Suicide Squad is because Warner Brothers, of course, and especially to the criticism about how Kevin Conroy was being handled in what was potentially his last performance as Batman, I think was dismissed out of hand because of the fact that now it won't be, but it still doesn't change the fact that this is the same Batman from Arkham Asylum, Arkham Origins, Arkham Knight, Arkham City, probably the most popular and celebrated Batman video game of all time. I know one of my good friends, he was telling me that this is his favorite version of Batman, and I can see that because he is definitely one of the more definitive versions of Batman. A lot of people that I know, when they think of Batman, they think of the Arkham version, and they way too easily kind of just dispatched of him in a very unceremonious and pretty disrespectful way. And what it feels like is that these creators just don't really care about the fans. They don't really care about the characters, and it feels like they were given access to creatively work with something that they didn't care about to begin with. So instead of treating the properties with love and respect, they're kind of using them to go carte blanche, do what they want, in a way that just feels like just soul-sucking. The idea of the game doesn't inherently offend me or anything. I think that this actually could make for a fun little game if they were to just create some random pocket universe, just have this what-if scenario, and just have a video game of the Suicide Squad killing the Justice League in some random universe with versions of the characters that we haven't really spent time with. When multiverse is at its highest, when it feels easiest to just have blank versions of the characters that you could do anything you want with. It's weird that they chose to go into the Arkham universe and take a big old shit on it. And what's frustrating too, it just feels like it's coming in at a time where Warner Brothers has never been more disrespectful towards DC. We got a lot of this James Gunn stuff coming up. You know, who knows how it'll be. I'm going to give it a chance, but I've had a lot of reservations with the things that I've heard. And one of my main concerns with what James Gunn does is that I feel like he works better with misfit characters, versions of characters that aren't very remotely like the comic counterparts. I think that what he does well is that he kind of converts D-listers that nobody really cares about into household names by kind of making versions of them that are compelling and human. But the thing is that you can't really twist and mold characters after your own image when you're talking about Batman, Superman, all those other characters. It's fine. No one's going to care when you don't make Polka Dot Man exactly like the comics. Nobody's going to care when you change Peacemaker into John Cena. But when you do that to Batman and Superman, that's a whole different story. And I'm worried that this is something that he's not going to be able to make work. But beyond that, you know, Warner Brothers, they've really jerked our chains around. They've lost a lot of trust, and this has been reflected in the box office of the movies. They've whittled, segmented, and divided their fans so much that nobody really is interested in DC anymore. And as a DC fan, it really sucks to see these properties treated so poorly. This could be easily the biggest movie universe on the planet, but because they played games, because they ruined things, because they meddled and just sabotaged a lot of creative prospects, nobody gives a shit about them anymore, and nobody comes to watch these movies anymore. I just wish that they had oversight when it was appropriate, like what should have happened here. But then when it comes to meddling in things that they don't belong in, like Zack Snyder's Justice League, they'll go full ham, be counterintuitive, spend insane amounts of money to ruin the movie force garbage mandates like the 2-hour runtime. They've just made this property repeatedly more and more unsalvageable. I really am concerned for what's going to happen with this movie universe when it actually gets up and going, because unless it's really good, people are not going to come back. They also need to differentiate themselves from what's come in the past. But when you have randomly selected characters like Peacemaker and Waller still hanging around, it's just kind of confusing. We've seen Peacemaker interact with Zack Snyder's Justice League, Momoa's Aquaman, Ezra Miller's Flash, so it doesn't make sense to bring him into the new universe. We also just did not get any kind of satisfying resolution to this universe, and this is something that's becoming more and more apparent. Some people think that maybe the reason that Suicide Squad Killed the Justice League was allowed to do what it wanted to is because the new video games that are going to be coming out in the future are going to be related to James Gunn. And this is also likely why we're already jumping into Crisis on Infinite Earths in this big culminating chapter for the Tomorrowverse, when the Tomorrowverse has only been running for about 3 years. Feels way too soon to do something like Crisis on Infinite Earths, and that feels like they're setting it up to be the finale of the Tomorrowverse, which really didn't have the time to actually get its legs and really get momentum. And I assume that Crisis on Infinite Earths is their way of sweeping the board, making room for new animated movies and projects that are set in the DCU. It's just very frustrating to have these things all going around. Feels like your loyalty is rewarded with getting spat in the face. And that's just been the constant cycle of Warner Brothers and DC for the last 10 years. Feels like a cycle of your loyalty being rewarded by being shit on. You like Zack Snyder? Take him away. You like the stuff to come afterwards? Take it away. Half-hearted compromises? Yo, let's go with that. They're not pleasing anybody. They just can't make anybody happy. And Justice League 2017 is the perfect example of why. Yeah, you didn't make everybody happy with Man of Steel and Batman vs Superman, and I understand that they wanted to course correct with Justice League, but what they did in Justice League is they tried to please fans that didn't like these versions of the characters to begin with, and then they totally alienated the people who liked Man of Steel and Batman vs Superman. And when you watch and see the reactions to Zack Snyder's Justice League, they're actually pretty unifying. Most people who, even if they didn't love Batman vs Superman, most people that I know really get behind Zack Snyder's Justice League. And yeah, it's a long-ass movie, but that's because we're getting the completely unedited cut. We're getting everything. If it was released theatrically, it obviously would have been more like 3 hours, but because they had this opportunity to just provide the entire uncut director's cut, they just gave it to us, and I'm glad that they did. Hopefully one day we'll actually feel like we're being rewarded for being there for this property, but in the meantime, it just feels like one black eye after the next. I hate to be so negative about DC all the time because I love DC, I love these characters, and you know, I think that I'll make videos about Batman the Animated Series or animated DC movies that I do like, because I feel like as I go through the Tomorrowverse more, it's going to be more negatives. But those are just my thoughts on what's going on with DC, what's going on with Warner Brothers, and just why they hate their fans, why they bring in people who hate these characters. It's really just an odd thing. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section. I'd love to hear. I'm GM Light. Have a good one.